You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Hristodoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to more of the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Hristodoulou, and today I am diving into the NFC North offenses, ranking them from worst to first, giving my thoughts and opinions on all of them and more. So make sure you comment down below. I want you to give me your power rankings for these offenses here. Make sure you also give me your thoughts and opinions on my power rankings and just kind of what you expect to see from these offenses here. But without further ado, we will get right into it, starting off with the number 4 team that I have on my list here, and a team that is kind of hard for me to put here because they've had a great offense pretty much my entire life, but they have so much change going on this season. I have a hard time justifying having them any higher, and I'm going to begin with, at number 4, the Green Bay Packers, a team that has a new quarterback, a very, very young wide receiver room, a extremely young tight end room, but you still do have some veteran leadership and guys that have been around in both your running back room and along the offensive line. But let's talk about this passing game first as a whole here. Obviously, Jordan Love now going into his 3rd season. It's showtime for him at this point. Do or die. If he's not ready, I don't really know how much longer you can really give him if he's not ready to go, because you've had 2 seasons now to try to mold him while Aaron Rodgers has been running the show. So it's up to Jordan Love now to take the reins and continue that streak of quarterback excellence that the Green Bay Packers have had. But my real big concern beyond Jordan Love is basically your receivers, and that goes from the wide receiver room to the tight end room. You do not have a guy rostered right now in your wide receiver room specifically that has been in the NFL longer than since last season, which is an absolute wild stat that I found while I was running through some of the rosters and depth charts for all 4 of these teams here. When I came across that and realized it, I thought to myself, wow, it's crazy because you see some of the frustration Aaron Rodgers had last season with just how inexperienced and young this wide receiver room was and why Randall Cobb was like his go-to guy. It kind of makes sense. The group is very young. There's a lot of potential upside, of course, but it's still a very young and inexperienced group. Of course, you have Christian Watson, who really started to look like he could be a number 1 wide receiver in the NFL last season during the back half of the year. And then you have Romeo Doubs, who I would say he was like hit or miss at times. Sometimes he was dropping a pass here or there that you think he should have been on, or maybe he was clearly a miscommunication in terms of the route he's supposed to be running. And then other times he's making highlight reel plays. So you do have like a good 1-2 combination to start. And then of course you went and got Jaden Reed from Michigan State in the 2nd round this year as well. So there's a lot of potential upside. It's just a very young group of wide receivers there, not to mention everyone else behind them. And then you look at the tight end room. Basically you're 1 and 2 at tight end right now, or the 2 guys you drafted this year, and that's Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. And again, no experience in the NFL between the 2. Just a lot of youth on this Green Bay Packers offensive side of the roster, and it obviously just leads to, concerns about how are they all going to perform as such a young, inexperienced group. It's gonna force guys like Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson, who have only been there for 2 years now, to really step up. The good news is, though, you do still have a great offensive line. You have a excellent 1-2 punch running back combination in Aaron Jones and in A.J. Dillon, and I think that's really going to help take the pressure off of the passing game, and I would expect to see the Green Bay Packers lean into their running backs a little bit more, at least this season, or in the early portions of the year, to try to just get Jordan Love comfortable, get this entire offense kind of just rolling and trying to really find what their true identity is going to be. And then, of course, the offensive line. You don't really have to concern yourself about them too much. You have a pretty dominant group up front. Elton Jenkins is your anchor at left guard. You have Josh Myers, who's turning into a really excellent center for the team, and then John Runyon on the right side of the offensive line as well. I do have concerns, as do from what it sounds like a lot of others, just about David Bakhtiari getting back to form. He's dealt with a lot of injury issues the last couple of years, but even if he gets back to like 75-80% of what he was a couple of years ago, that's still a really good guy to have on the blind side of your quarterback. And then you have Zach Tom on the right side, second year guy. He was the 4th round pick in last year's draft. We'll have to watch his performance and see if he continues to gel with the rest of the other guys on this O-line here. But it's just, I really chalk up this offense to just, there's so much inexperience and so much unknown is the best way I think I could put it. Like if I was to put a label on the Green Bay Packers offensive group of players, it's just unknown. Like, yeah, you know what Aaron Jones is and AJ Dillon, but like the rest of the guys, you don't really necessarily know what you're going to get with Jordan Love at the helm. So a lot more questions than I have answers right now, hence why I have the Packers sitting at number 4. Coming in at the number 3 spot, a team that's been doing a lot to really push their passing game to the next level here. They were excellent on the ground last year, but we need to see some more from that aerial attack. I am talking the Chicago Bears. Now, here's the deal with Chicago. I am one of the people that really wants to see Justin Fields succeed, and I think from what they seem to be doing in Chicago right now, there is real potential for some serious improvement. I'm not going to sit here and say that I think that they are going to shock the world and completely blow people out of the water, but this is a group that I think might be better than some people are anticipating. I know that there was a lot of concerns regarding the passing game last year, but Chase Claypool gets an offseason now to kind of get himself acclimated to what's been going on. You know, I feel like trade deadline wide receivers, unless they are like brainiacs, tend to take a little bit longer to just kind of get themselves into the system and get rolling. So he has the entire offseason program now to really get himself ready to go. You have DJ Moore, who's coming in from Carolina. You obviously have Darnell Mooney, who's looked really good this year as well. It's clear that there is a big commitment from the personnel group, the brass, coaching staff, all those people to get the right personnel around Justin Fields to be successful, but it's up to offensive coordinator Luke Getsy to get this passing game quicker. I feel like I understand you have guys that can be big play threats here. I think, honestly, those 3 receivers I just mentioned, your starting trio, any one of those guys could beat a defense over the top if you needed them to, but Justin Fields needs time, especially with an offensive line in front of him that has been shaky at best when it comes to pass protection. They can bulldoze open driveways or full highways for their running game to go through, but it seems like the pass protection is a little suspect, and while there has been additions to the O-line, we'll talk about that in a second, I am a little bit just kind of be cautious, keep the passing game quicker for Justin Fields, at least out of the gate, to let him get comfortable and get this whole group of wide receivers on the same page before we really try to open things up and get crazy. Running game, there are some question marks here as well. It is Khalil Herbert's running back room now going forward. He will be the guy taking the reins with Dante Foreman backing him up, and you also have the 4th-round pick out of Texas, Rashawn Johnson, to look forward to seeing as well. So I'm not too worried about the running back room. I think the Bears have a clear system with their running back setup and the way their running game just works scheme-wise altogether. I think those guys could be an excellent trio of guys to kind of rotate through, and I think Khalil Herbert's a pretty strong running back as well, so I'm not too worried about the ground game. But like I said, it really does boil down to this offensive line. And can they protect Justin Fields and continue the dominance they showed in terms of opening up those running lanes that they had last year? The good news is clear directive to try to upgrade the pass protection of this offensive line. We saw the drafting of offensive tackle Darnell Wright this offseason from Tennessee. Tennessee Titans guard Nate Davis was brought in as well during free agency, but it will be up to some of the other guys. Tevin Jenkins is obviously a stud. That's not somebody I'm too worried about, but Braxton Jones is someone I'm keeping an eye on because while, again, this offensive line was really good when it came to opening up running lanes, and Braxton Jones, one of those guys who looked pretty solid, he struggled when it came to protecting Justin Fields. PFF credited him for 7 sacks altogether last season, so we're going to need to see some improvement from him and just overall improvement as a unit protecting the quarterback. But clearly, there was an effort to upgrade that, so I'm hoping to see results be positive. Obviously, things could go south, but I do think the Bears have a good opportunity to shock some people with how good they end up being. Could it completely bottom out and fail? Absolutely, but I'm erring a little bit more on the positive side. Looking at the number 2 team, though, and I'll tell you right now, I was really juggling between who I was going to have at number 1 and who I was going to have at number 2 here because I think that there are 2 really good offenses left to discuss. But at the number 2 spot, and this has to do more with just circumstance than anything else, I'm going to go with the Detroit Lions. Now, I will say I heavily considered having them as the number 1 team, but the big reason why I'm sitting here saying maybe not as the number 1 team just yet it comes down to the suspension of wide receiver Jameson Williams. This is something that I hate for the Lions and I hate for Jameson Williams because it really just seems like a matter of just misunderstanding. But obviously he's serving the 6-game suspension for the gambling at an NFL facility. But you still do have Amon-Ra St. Brown, Josh Reynolds, who if you're not a Lions fan, maybe you don't necessarily know what he's all about, but a solid guy that could be a good number 3 option for you. You went and signed veteran wide receiver Marvin Jones Jr. as well from Jacksonville. You drafted Iowa tight end Sam Laporta in the 2nd round, basically to try to replace the loss of TJ Hawkinson this past season. I think you have a really good group of guys that will take that next step and elevate even further once Jameson Williams is back. But I do think minus him, it does hurt the offense just a little bit. And I will say this offense last year didn't even have Jameson Williams and still completely lit it up regardless. Do I think that you're, guaranteed to get those same results? Obviously not. The NFL changes year over year. What worked last year does not necessarily mean it's going to work this year. But I do think that the ceiling of this offense gets even higher with Jameson Williams in the fold. And I think it does hurt them just a little bit to not have him here. Also, you can chalk up losing DJ Chark as someone that I really would have liked to see the Lions keep just because he is a great burner, but it is what it is. But overall, Jared Goff, kind of coming off of what was a career season for him, and almost, well, not career season, but very close to career season. He had a big resurgence last year, that's for sure. 4,400 yards, he had 29 touchdowns, 7 picks, and 65% completion percentage. He looked like the Jared Goff of like 2017 or 2018 when he was duking it out with Patrick Mahomes during that Monday Night Football All-Star game or whatever the heck it was, where, both teams scored like almost 100 combined points, whatever that number was. It's easy to forget how good Jared Goff was at one point in time because of where his career has kind of ended up now, but this is an offensive unit that has legit firepower. And if Jared Goff has really found himself again, while I know the Rams won the Super Bowl the year after trading for Matthew Stafford, I will say this. If Jared Goff winds up being the long-term answer for the Lions, short-term, Rams win the trade. Obviously, you get a Super Bowl out of it. In the long term, though, if Jared Goff hangs around and he's playing the way he did last year for the next, 5, 6, 7 years maybe or so, the Lions are kind of the long-term winners of that trade. The long-term. Short-term, obviously, Rams get the bowl. You can't argue with that. But Jared Goff looked like a completely different human being last season, at least compared to what we've seen from the last few years when he was in L.A. I don't know where it's going to go, but I'm really excited to see what this offense can do passing-wise because I think that the sky is the limit, especially once Jameson Williams comes back. Running game will be interesting to watch. DeAndre Swift obviously being traded to the Eagles, but you went and got yourself a do-it-all running back in Alabama's Jahmyr Gibbs. Again, a do-it-all guy. He could go all 3 downs. DeAndre Swift was hurt a lot throughout his time in Detroit, so I can understand that, yes, he had really good potential upside, but you're starting over fresh with a guy who was dominant. I feel like Alabama just kind of breeds excellent running backs. You put him into that offense that, again, does not need him to be the guy. I think he might have a real opportunity to feast over there in Detroit. And then you look at the offensive line. I would argue that the Lions have, an offensive line that can go up with the best of them. They are arguably one of the best offensive line groups in the NFL. You have 3 first-round picks on that offensive line. You have Jonah Jackson, Frank Ragnow, and Halapuli Vaitai as one of your offensive linemen as well. And then your offensive tackles are Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell, who is looking like the guy that everyone was expecting him to be coming into the NFL. I really have not too many concerns about this offense. It really just comes down to they're missing Jameson Williams. They're missing what was supposed to be a key piece for this offense this year. And while Jahmyr Gibbs appears to be the 3-down, do-it-all back that you want to have on this offense, you don't necessarily know what you're going to get out of him. So that'll be something to watch as well. But overall, like I said, it was this close between the Lions and the Vikings, who are my number 1 team. And realistically, you release Dalvin Cook as the Vikings. Alexander Madison's going to get the go to be the number 1 running back, at least to start. Hasn't really done too much in his career in terms of numbers. He had a career low 89 touches in 2022, but his career average 4.1 yards per carry, 7.5 yards per reception. Pretty solid for a running back there. I am excited to see what the Vikings do with their 7th-round selection, Dwayne McBride. This guy came from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And if you don't know about him, I definitely recommend you check him out because this guy was an absolute stud. I know he's playing FBS football, so, anyone that wants to say, oh, it wasn't Division I A or whatever it is, or AA, excuse me, I get it. He wasn't playing in the FCS. However, I don't really think you can deny somebody who still averaged 7.4 yards per carry. He had 19 touchdowns, 1,700 yards rushing off of 233 runs last year. And during his 3 seasons at UAB, he showed clear, steady progression, getting better and better at what he was doing. And he did it all in under 500 rushing attempts. This is a guy with really fresh legs who showed an ability that was clearly well above the talent he was playing against. Keep your eye on him. Don't be surprised if you see him get some touches. Passing game is obviously, this is where, and this is kind of where it really starts to where my separation, I guess you should say, kind of comes in between the Vikings and the Lions. Obviously, Kirk Cousins, he's been a steady hand for the quarterback spot in Minnesota ever since he's gotten there from Washington. Whether you like Kirk Cousins or not, whether you think he's a good quarterback or not, he is somewhere between a solid option and a guy who can be a really good option for you. We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty details of whether, he folds under pressure and under the spotlight in those primetime games. Overall, though, his body of work has been really good in Minnesota. His receiving group, it's unbelievable right now. It's an excellent group that you have to look forward to. You obviously have Justin Jefferson, who is arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL. I personally believe he is the best wide receiver in the NFL right now. You bring in rookie Jordan Addison, who is probably the best route runner from this draft class, one of the more polished wide receivers. Yeah, he had a down year last season, but he is well respected for what he can do when it comes to running those routes, which is huge for guys coming into the NFL. It's typically guys that are more athletes that were just kind of beating everyone around them. If you can get a guy who's a really polished route runner and he's athletic, watch out for Jordan Addison because I think he is an excellent complement for Justin Jefferson. KJ Osborne, great number 3 option there. And then your tight end is TJ Hawkinson. I mean, he didn't really get a ton of time to really get himself developed into the offense, but with the loss of Dalvin Cook and not necessarily expecting the offense to be geared as much around the run game, I think there's going to be plenty of balls thrown to all of these guys to be able to eat and feast and make some moves. I think TJ Hawkinson is really going to benefit from having an offseason within this offense here. They're going to be put to the test, minus Dalvin Cook, but I have really no concerns regarding the offense here. I know that you lost Dalvin Cook. I know that's a thing. And I'm not going to say that this is possible, but I mean, Dalvin Cook's still a free agent. I know that they released him, but wouldn't it be wild if, Dalvin Cook's market isn't what he thought and they bring him back? That would be crazy. Obviously, probably not going to happen, but I mean, I've seen crazy things happen in the NFL. Not saying it's going to happen. I don't think it's likely it's going to happen, but wouldn't that be an idea? He is still out there. He's still a free agent, and I haven't really heard much as far as running backs are concerned, other than them being unhappy with how much they're getting paid right now. And then the offensive line, I mean, they're about as steady as any other offensive lines in the NFL. I mean, you have Christian Darrisaw, Brian O'Neill anchoring the edges there. You got first and second rounders all across the board, and you have a really stout group altogether. I was really happy that they were able to re-sign center Garrett Bradbury this offseason. This is somebody that I thought they might end up losing, but they were able to keep within their organization, so that's excellent for them as well. Keep the guy that essentially calls everything in terms of adjustments for your O-line. He has the rapport with Kirk Cousins. I think that's one of those more anytime a team can keep a really good center under contract and not lose them, that's one of those things that I feel like doesn't get as appreciated as much because O-line isn't as sexy as everything else in the NFL. But when you can keep a guy who's been steady for you, who's been really good and has that rapport with your quarterback, the quarterback and center is kind of like bread and butter. Like they just go together and you need them to gel and work well together. So whenever that is whenever it's an excellent duo between the two, it's one less thing to worry about, and it becomes one of those things where rather than it being a worry or just like something you have to think about between those two guys, it's just reps. It's just reps. They don't have to. That communication is there. It's natural. They've been doing it together for a while now. It's one of those things that people don't necessarily think about, but the communication between a center and a quarterback is very important. And for them to keep Garrett Bradbury, I think is huge. But yes, overall, I do think the Minnesota Vikings do edge out the Detroit Lions by just a hair. I'm not going to sit here and act like they're that much better than the Lions offensively. You could argue, the Lions might have even had a really strong stretch compared to what the Vikings did last year, but I will give a very, very hair-like edge to the Minnesota Vikings. But those are my power rankings for the offenses in the NFC North. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, I greatly appreciate it as always. I will see you all next time. Have a good one.